All right. Tell me you're joking time. Coming in with a little dirty rock. You like this? You like this, by the way?
I'm digging this.
A little St. Louis love today. A couple of my favorite people in the world, the Manis brothers.
I've heard of them.
Yeah, they, I haven't seen them in a little while. You know, life gets in the way. They had that top of the butt, long hair, 70s rock style hair.
Yeah.
Two-piece. All this is from two dudes. You got
one cup, two dudes,
one cup. Yep.
One guitar.
One guitar, one drum, two mics. Good stuff. Go check them out, people. Support local. You know, everybody's like, shop local Saturday. Whatever. Just go on Spotify.
Napster, that shit.
Yeah, right. A lot of things going on in the world, man. Tom Mudd, you're back.
We're back.
You've been gone for
in
a
the
little
flesh.
bit. What have you been doing?
Hiding under rocks.
you actually went back and listened and like, oh my God, I'm out. Tap.
I'm out. No, we were just talking before we came on. I'm probably not alone in this, but I don't typically follow politics like your typical poli-sci major might.
Those nerds.
I feel like I'm sitting across from one.
Yeah, who's here?
And, you kind of get to a point where it's like, okay, I've heard this news cycle before. I've heard this. And I'm not one that keeps the news on in general. And I think I touched on this a little bit, but I almost feel like I have to do my homework before coming on here now just to make sure I've got enough topics to hit on. But I think it's an important thing to think about because regardless of what side of the aisle you're on, most Americans tap out.
Yeah.
At some point, whether it's 100 days into a new regime or whatever it is, and it's not that they necessarily don't care. I think for many people, you just get to a point where you feel kind of helpless. It's like, well, there's nothing I can do.
Well, the one thing that I've noticed here, we're I don't know, now we're at 106 days in, whatever it is, to T2.0.
Are you counting? Do you have a tracker somewhere?
No, I just know that last week was the whole 100-day grade. I'm guesstimating.
Yep.
I don't really. I get in the weeds, but not that deep. But point being, like, here's what I've noticed as far as news cycles go. Not even the news itself. Even from reputable sources, be it CNBC or Wall Street Journal or whatever it is. What I would consider the influencer / pass-through news through social media networks, friends, circles, that's dissipating. And I have a theory. I think like those that were, screw the libs, Sleepy Joe, well, they now have 106, 107 days of this.
Yeah.
And they got quiet. They got really quiet. Now, and here's what I've seen though. The first 50 days and even getting close to that whole Independence Day, right? It was all, you got to let it work. This is 4D chess. And it was all these kind of hypothetical, support statements that just simply aren't manifesting.
Yeah.
So I think a lot of people are burnt out and they've tuck-tailed and ran.
Yeah.
Trying to just live their own lives because here's the reality of what we're dealing with at this point. Little things like crude oil. Everybody's like, oh my God, we're talking about crude oil. Well, it matters because, historically, if oil is $70 a barrel or whatever, the stuff that actually makes fuel, gas that goes in our car, then you can see competitive fuel prices and supply and demand, and you'll see a decrease in price, maybe a little bit of an uptick in the summertime for travel. But we're at $54, $55 a barrel. And OPEC basically was like, screw you guys. We're gonna turn on our jets. And we're not seeing gas move. That's one example of,
I was going to say, so that's cheap for a barrel, isn't it? I mean, 50.
Very.
But we're not seeing that price at the pumps.
No, and the guy, if you're listening and you do get into this nerdy stuff, Mr. Global, I believe is his handle on TikTok and Insta, came from the energy industry. He's straight independent. I mean, he bashes left, right equally. But when it comes to energy and oil and rigs, he's what I would consider the influencer of choice because he brings straight stats.
Yeah.
And, I've been watching him a lot the last few days. And he's like, you all been lied to. That's basically what he's saying. You go back over the past 4 years during the Biden administration, one of the little telltales was, on a weekly basis, there's a report that the federal government puts out that is like total number of rigs. And rigs are obviously production. And, during the Biden years, every single week was an increase in rigs and production, getting us to, the highest energy output that we've ever had. And if you go backwards in time, rig increases, the chart was straight arrow up since roughly mid-Obama. We're going down.
Yeah.
There's a decrease in total number of rigs that are producing. So, and that's a byproduct of OPEC saying, here's how we can mess with you stupid Americans. We're just going to flood the market with our own stuff. Now, if you keep drilling, drill baby drill, here's what's going to happen. The oil companies, the energy companies, you're not going to be able to sell it at a price in which you can make a profit. And you have to answer to shareholders.
Yeah.
So that's the dichotomy. So anyway, since we've completely lost everybody with...
No, but I think where that whole tangent started on, though, was news and media and certain types of news kind of dying. And you even mentioned Mr. Global, or is that his name? Mr. Global?
So. Yeah.
I think what you're going to see is more and more independent thinkers come up and kind of own the media world. They're going to build trust. And actually, it made me think of a Nietzsche quote that I screenshotted on my phone here.
Nietzsche, wow.
Let me bring this out here. The individual has always had to struggle to keep from being overwhelmed by the tribe. If you try it, you will be lonely often and sometimes frightened, but no price is too high to pay for the privilege of owning yourself. And I think from a news standpoint, people are smart enough to know that the news is bought and paid for, and it has been forever. Yeah. But what you're starting to see is this whole kind of new wave of independent journalists, whether it's on X or Twitter or whatever, kind of start to rise up.
Right.
And because of the technologies that are in place, they're amassing quite the followings. So it's going to be interesting to see at what point do they get corrupted because of money and sponsorships and that sort of thing, and couple that with all the other access to data and stuff like that. But I think media, the traditional media world as we know it, they've got to be worried.
Well, think about it this way, right? You can go on Substack, and if you become a micro influencer to the point where, when I say micro, I mean like, say you've got 10,000 followers, which is relatively small, in the grand scheme of socials. If 10% of those people, if they really like your content and you have a Substack page, kind of like Patreon, right?
Yeah.
$1 a month. Hey, $1 a month. Here's what I'm gonna do. I'm gonna give you all these video Zooms. I'm gonna give you content. You're part of the club. That's not hard to get.
Right.
Okay, so a simple multiplier effect on that, you immediately have influential individuals that maybe are replacing the I don't know what to do news cycles.
Yeah.
Right. And that's where they're coming from because that's where they're all getting paid. Jim Acosta, right? I really liked him from CNN.
Right.
He was super monotone, super down the middle, called balls and strikes, and that wasn't good enough for CNN. And he was like, okay, fine, see you, I'm out.
Yeah.
And he's over on Substack, and shit, I think he's up to like 50,000 subscribers.
Yeah.
So again, let's just say it's $1. And I know it's not. I'm not subscribing yet, but
right.
That's the draw. These guys can leave, and all you need is a decent Zoom camera.
Well, and the other thing too is I know you and I are both. I think it's safe to call you a Thomas Massey fan to some extent.
Oh yeah, I like his contrarianism.
Right.
Within the party.
I think what we can both appreciate though is, I don't know how transparent he is, but he's active on Facebook for sure. And I think with all this new media and with all this, I think it's an incredibly smart thing for every politician to be more transparent, to be hopefully honestly transparent, but to be in front of their constituents. Like, this is what I'm focused on. Call me out. If there's something else that I'm not focused on that I should be, call me out, But people don't know what the hell they're doing all day if you're not actively telling you, this is what I'm working on, this is what I'm fighting for, this is why you voted for me.
Let's jump into some news topics here, since we solved no problems there. First thing that I have down is, we're getting close to this hypothetical big, beautiful bill. And the key parts of this, just take out the 7,000 pork items. What we're really talking about is a tax cut plan as well as a deficit increase, debt ceiling increase. One begets the other. The tax cut is obviously going to, take away a ton of government revenue, and that government revenue pays our bills, and we got a pretty big debt, right? And everybody, most of the talking heads, the Jason Smith from Missouri 8, he's down there in the boot hill, which I find freaking hilarious. Let's think about that. The Ways and Means chair, the individual in the House of Representatives that's in charge of the department of the committee,
Yep.
that is scripting the largest budget in the world, the U.S. government's budget, comes from one of the 10 poorest fucking counties in America, with a whole long list of "we suck" attributes.
Yep.
He's in charge.
Qualified. I mean, he's up there as qualified though with the current administration.
Yeah. It's a cosplay position.
It reminds me, I'm a lifelong St. Louisan, so I can say this, but it reminds me of the meme. It's a map of Missouri, and it's like, if you look at the two most populous cities, it looks like they're trying their hardest to escape Missouri.
Keep running.
The boot hill's down there too. You know?
Cape Girardeau down there where he's at, that bridge is shaky.
Here's
where I was going. Here's where I was going with this. Basically, what we're looking at is kind of a re-up of the original Trump tax cuts, only with an acceleration on the top 10%. Now, I listened to Galloway the other day, and I did some research and went through Grok, went through chat, read a bunch of articles, and they all come up with the same numbers. Here's the reality of the original Trump tax cut. 81% of the value of the tax cut, money that was kept in people's pockets, 81% of that total went to the top 10% of Americans. That was weighted, 60% of that went to the top 1% of Americans. Okay? So, simply put, the plebes at 89% and down were splitting roughly 19% of this massive tax cut.
Yeah.
It just is bad policy, because what they're telling everybody in America is that this is for the middle class. This is for the working man, right? It's all a lie. And the numbers don't refute that.
Yeah, so let me play devil's advocate here a little bit, and we've kind of tiptoed around this, but I think anytime you mention the Trump tax cuts, you have to look at that side by side to what the tax code was before Trump came into office.
Well, can we say that there's two different things, though? There's a difference between tax rates / cuts to rates and tax code / policy.
Right.
Yeah.
So so the tax rates, what the rates were.
Yep.
You cannot look at the numbers and say that those making less than $300,000 a year were paying less taxes under Obama than they were under Trump. It's simply not true. So,
no, they're not. That's not what I'm saying.
I know. But what you're saying is basically the tax cuts in proportion largely outweighed and benefited the top 10%.
Yeah, because
1%.
I think the average for the median household in America, two income household, was roughly an $800 tax savings.
Right. And I guess the devil's advocate, the bear that I'm poking here is a little bit of a tax cut better than no tax cut?
I would argue no tax cut as long as we have $36 trillion and growing in debt. Because if you do the little tax cut and Doge has not been able to prove its worthiness.
Yeah.
Here we are 106 days in, right? Doge on their official page are claiming roughly $160 billion. Now, since the day that they came into fruition to now, our federal debt has increased close to $200 billion.
Yeah.
So even with those savings, they can't grow fast enough or compound fast enough to make a dent in the debt.
Right.
And therefore, that's why the Republicans are selling this tax cut, as the magic bullet. But history has proven that you can't grow fast enough out of that. There is no tax cut.
Yeah. So I think there's two things going on here, and this goes back to, dare I say the genius of the Trump administration is their ability to spin anything basically for people to jump in and say like, well, war chest or whatever.
I concur with you. The genius of this administration is the spin.
Right. Well, and this is the reality. And correct me if I'm wrong, because there's a 99% chance I'm wrong here. But if the Trump tax cuts were not renewed and we went back to the previous tax rates, everybody would pay more taxes.
Correct.
Including middle class and lower income families. I think it goes from 12 to 15%, I think was the bottom. It went up, I think 3 percentage points. So pretty significant, especially to a family that's making, less than $100,000 a year. That's a big chunk there. And so I think that's part of it. And that's what they're spinning is like, hey, we're keeping this cut in place. Now, regardless of what's going on the other side, it doesn't matter at this point because that's what everyone heard was this. But to your point, and I think you're spot on here, is the math isn't mathing.
No.
You have to either attack the deficit that you're creating from the tax cuts, or you have to tackle the deficit on the spending side. And they're not really doing either of those. You either have to shift the savings in the middle class and lower middle class to the upper, wealthier families or whatnot, or you have to find another way to generate revenue.
Well, again, we'll go back to their words, not mine. They claim that growth, this infusion of people's tax dollars back in their pocket of small business owners is going to spur growth and everything else.
Yeah.
And even at their best projection, we would still only be looking at about a 4 to 4.2 GDP.
Right.
This is their number, right? Now, in the same breath, the tariffs that are being sought after at this point, their own people admit that it's going to be a 1 to 2 point basically tax on, our GDP.
Yeah.
Okay, so now we're talking about a 2 to 2.5% actual GDP, and again, the math doesn't math.
Yeah.
You can't grow enough to get out of the shit and still provide services to the American people.
Yeah, and unfortunately with that, I think it's a case of, well, it's going to be someone else's problem.
Well, that's exactly what they're doing.
And at one point, and I am not up to speed on the current bill and where it stands and what's in there and what's not in there anymore, but at one point they were going to eliminate the federal income tax for anyone making less than like $200,000 a year, right? Is that still in there, or is that?
They're still talking about it.
Because I think what I love about that from both an optics standpoint and just a taxationist theft perspective is I would much rather pay higher sales tax than a blanket federal income tax, because then I can more or less dictate where my money is going.
Yeah, but it's the gallon of milk theory, though. It's somebody making $30,000 a year and somebody making $300,000 a year pay the same for that gallon of milk. Right? It's a $3 gallon or a $4 gallon in today's world. So that percentage, while you're disproportionately taxing lower income individuals.
Sure. No, I get that.
That's why the sales tax theory, it's great, because the theory is you can kind of manage your own tax liability through your own consumption.
Yeah. Well, maybe stop drinking milk, right?
Yeah. Well, I'm pretty sure Pepsi probably still have the same tax.
Which I might be misattributing this because who knows what's real and what's not needed anymore. But I think Trump was quoted this week of saying something like, well, just buy less junk then.
Or yeah. Instead of $30 at Christmas, why not take 2? And instead of 200 pencils, how about 5?
I think it was tied into the Temu loop, or tariff loop or whatever and all that.
Dumb. Okay, let's move on. What you got? What's your first
what do we got here? Let's hit a fun one. How about that?
Yeah, let's do it. I got a couple fun ones coming here.
Trump as Pope. Was that on your list?
You know what? Nothing surprises me anymore. Here's what surprised me about that is the Catholics in my world,
yeah,
who did vote for him, eerily silent.
Yep.
And I find that to be kind of to the point of what we were talking about at the open of the show.
Yeah.
I think the tail tucking and hiding is in full effect. That was an example of you just at some point, don't be a dick.
Yeah.
And that's just being a dick.
Did you see his post yesterday on Cinco de Mayo?
Was it the flashback to whenever he said, "I love Hispanics"?
Yeah. He's eating a taco salad in his New York office, it looks like. So this is my take on it. Is some of the silence is attributed, I think, to people acknowledging that this guy is just poking the bear. He's out there trying to rile as much people as possible.
Trump 28.
You know, he's always done that. This is not news to him or whatever. And I think he's the perfect example of no news is bad news. He just wants to be in the cycle, whether it's ego or whether it's something, more geniusly behind that. We'll never know. I think it's ego. That's just my personal opinion. But I think what this does to people is it riles people up.
Totally.
And he loves that.
Well,
so it's like you're feeding right into this whole thing. Anytime people sees that and they rile it up. And I think it's Robert Greene in his book Mastery, or one of those book series or whatever. It kind of talks about the best thing to do in those types of situations to get that to go away. And it's just ignore it. Don't give them the platform. Don't even run a news cycle on it,
Well, that's where the I'm not even going to say Democratic Party. I'm just going to say the influential libs on socials. They see this stuff and they just run it up the flagpole of like earth shattering, and it's this is the end of our democracy, etc. No, it's none of that. What it is it's a bunch of assholes doing asshole shit. And it has a base that knows that they hate the libs, and so they continue to perpetuate it and push it out there, and they see it as this whole TDS thing. And it's not. Normal people like us that are in the middle would look at it and like you're just a fucking dipshit.
Yeah, so this thought just came to me, but do you think of it any differently when it's from a sports perspective? If you're trying to get in the head of another opposing soccer team, anything you're going to do to rile them up or whatever.
Yeah, no, sports, I'm all for it. And the reason is, excuse me, that's fun.
Yeah.
That's intended to be, you have a clear-cut winner, you have a clear-cut loser, this is how it goes, that's the nature of the game. The role of the president, he has 335 million citizens that he's responsible for.
Yeah.
But the way that he's acting is that he doesn't give a shit about 65%. Because he knows the 35% gets him the numbers he needs in an election.
Sure.
That's the difference.
Yeah.
Oh, my goodness.
Totally
One of those days. My turn here. Dave Portnoy.
Oh, man. So he was in the news a lot. I saw the bar.
Yep, that's where I'm going with this. Barstool Sports has physical locations, bars, clubs, etc., all over the country. They have a bar in Philly, and over the weekend, I believe there was, or maybe Sunday night, there was a group of people in there, and they had bought one of those little battery-powered little, marquee signs, and basically said "F the Jews," or F no.
Yeah, I think.
F the Jews. It doesn't matter. That's the gist of it. And Portnoy goes ballistic because he sees it on socials, etc., through his own research and his team. And
he's Jewish, just so people that aren't familiar, that live under a rock.
Yeah. One bite, everybody knows the rules. Now you know. It's the pizza bite guy. And he's pretty vocal, and he's been definitely more of a conservative supporter over the years. And I think I don't view him as MAGA. I view him as just progressive lib.
I think it goes back to my quote. He's himself, and I think he's unapologetically himself, and people love that.
Yeah, because he also does a lot of trading, and he does, makes it all public. Everything the dude does, he makes public. He's really pretty transparent for an individual in his position. So anyway, the sign hits socials. He finds out. He goes ballistic. He does these little emergency press conferences, whether it's a Final Four issue or this, and everything in between. And basically, he's like, okay, the two girls that work for me, they're fucking fired. He goes off on all them, and he's like chasing down the two guys that were in it. Fast forward, the next call, He gets the guys that are in there and says that here's where we're at. We was on the phone with him with these two kids. They're 18 plus or 21 years old actually because they were in the bar, and their parents were on the phone call too. And the deal that they struck was that he was flying them to Auschwitz. He didn't want an apology. He didn't want anything. He said, here's the deal. I'm not going to blast you. I'm not going to, in his quote words, ruin your lives, right? I'm going to educate you and make this a learning moment.
Yeah.
And he basically was like, I'm going to fly them to Auschwitz. I'm going to send them to Poland. I'm going to let them go there. They're going to learn, et cetera, et cetera. They're young. They're going to learn. We're going to move on. And then the next day, one of the kids is like, well, my attorney says, oh, you can't go. And now he's flipping out.
Yep.
I don't really have like a moral of the story to this, and I don't think there is one. I think it's just indicative of the chaos that we're currently living under. And I think guys like Dave Portnoy, who, he's Jewish. He's definitely anti-Hamas, as are most normal, sane individuals.
Yep.
But the way he approached it, and in his crazy brain, here's what I'm going to do. I'm not going to out him. I'm going to send him to Auschwitz. I thought that was absolutely brilliant.
Yeah. I completely agree. And as you're talking through this, and I didn't watch it live, but his little press conferences, whether they're funny or serious like this one was, they're always entertaining regardless. Yep. And I remember watching that one. And my initial thought was, okay, these kids are probably 21, maybe 22 years old. Think about the childhood that they grew up with. Keyboard warriors could say whatever the hell they want to without any repercussions. Now they're in the real world. They're in college. They're sitting in a bar, and they decide to say something that behind keys, they still would have gotten blasted, but they could have run and hid from it. I don't know. I think you're going to see more and more of this. And to your point, kudos to Dave for stepping up in the way he did and calling bullshit on it. I mean, it's unacceptable. And I think he can definitely come off as a hothead. He's unfiltered, I think is the best way to say it. Not a hothead, but he's unfiltered. He's unapologetically himself. But I think it's a wake-up call to the youth, if you will, and just be like, hey, listen, and what's frustrating about all of this is the administration is no good example of this.
Exactly.
It's like, who are their role models out there,
Yeah.
But I do think it's going to be interesting to see over the coming years how this meld of online and physical happens, especially with this generation of kids that are coming up into the real world that have lived their whole life in the digital space, and how that translates over to the real world,
Okay, we've got about a minute and a half till first break. You got a short one for me?
Yeah, this could be as short as you want it to be.
Let's do it.
Brian Nichols' show. Somehow I started following this on Facebook. It's entertaining. It tends to lean a little bit right. Posted a picture yesterday about how we can help America's trade. And it basically says, instead of building a wall, Trump can build a canal. The canal is 2 miles wide, totally screws over Panama, creates massive new trade route. U.S. becomes more powerful than the rest of the world combined. We can use water to fill the canal as recovered by melting polar ice caps. Now, immediately I was like, okay, this is a satirical post, obviously, but it got me thinking, what if instead of a wall, there was a giant canal right there that's 2 miles wide that opens up a trade route? I'm like, man, that's not that crazy. I don't know.
No, you know what? Logistically, I've heard of way worse ideas. I actually kind of like that idea. Fund it.
Yeah, I don't know.
You know what? If that drops costs, et cetera, solves a whole bunch of problems. Yeah, I like that. I'm going to chew on that. Tell me you're joking. We're going to take a quick break. Please remember to subscribe, share it, write a review. I haven't seen any reviews in a while. I want to hear how much you love or hate this, preferably. I like the hate. I told you that.
Bring the hate on.
Bring the hate. We'll be right back. Got some more topics ranging from Miss Bondi saving 250 million people, fraud, and who's not going to jail, Tesla, and a few other things. We'll be right back. All right. Back. I'm gonna pop one off here real quick. I mentioned a few topics that we're going to be coming down the pipe. That 100-day roll call / North Korean honor thy leader meeting they had at the White House last week, the one thing that jumped out to me was Pam Bondi talking about how DEA and their team and under President Trump's leadership and initiative, we've taken, reclaimed so many thousands of fentanyl pills, and get this, Mr. President, you saved 258 million lives. And we kind of alluded to it earlier, like what is the skill of this particular administration, and it is the spin. At some point, do you think that we're just past the point of any of these statements actually being called out by, quote, normal conservatives? Because Fox ate it up, OAN ate it up, they all ate it up.
Yeah.
And even clearly all the usual suspects on Twitter were like, oh my God, 258, imagine what would happen if it was Sleepy Joe. Thin red line world.
Yeah.
Is there ever going to be a statement that crosses the line, in your opinion?
So I think this is the problem, is people don't want to be educated, they want to be entertained. And I can't think of, in his first 4 years and in his current 106 days in office, if he hasn't crossed the red line yet, there might not be a red line.
I don't think there is. I hope there is. And let me kind of qualify where I'm coming at with, because I've used the thin red line analogy a number of times on the show. I have no expectation that he's going to find it. Why I put it out there is I want to know that some of the people that I know firsthand, or that are friends, or that I respect, or even people that I just know within the, quote, news world.
Yeah.
Do any of them have a thin red line? And that's what scares me more.
I think what it comes down to, and it kind of goes back to the point I was talking about earlier, is the fact that what's the purpose behind it? So like the stat around fentanyl and lives saved, I mean, that's just mathematically, it's impossible. American lives, at least. Maybe he's talking about global lives and all that stuff, but even then, it's like, no, like just do the quick math on how many people even live in this country or globally. But we've already known, whether it's the Doge savings or other numbers that they've thrown out there, that they don't care about the math. They don't care about it checking out. They just care about it being in the news cycle. And then they can point back to the liberal media and say, look how ridiculous. They covered that and they knew factually it wasn't even true. Why would I ever say that? It's that.
Yeah. I was thinking of the ridiculous nature of the statement and how they're claiming that they've put this lockdown on the border and they're capturing everything. Yet at the exact same time, the United States has far more prisons than any other nation in the world.
Yeah.
You can't keep drugs out of a federal penitentiary, right? If you can't do it there, behind a wall of razor wire, 2 walls of brick, hundreds of guards and
Right.
and metal bars. If drugs finds its way into those rooms, what are you really doing?
Yeah.
Other than claiming the billboard.
Well, I think that's why he's reopening Alcatraz, is to prevent that.
I started to type that down, and I'm like, nope.
Not going there.
Nope. Go ahead. What you got?
Not going there. All right. I'm looking for education on this one. The Ukraine mineral deal. Did that sign? I saw some news that it might have signed or was going to sign, or that we worked something out there.
So this is one of those things. I think it's smoke and mirrors, because I looked into that the other day. Just one of my 5 a.m. mornings. Like, what am I going to do to entertain myself? Ukraine minerals. There's nothing out there now. Here's what the conservatives are going to say, or anybody listening that's a MAGA lover here. They're going to be like, well, the art of the deal is you don't talk about it publicly. Nah, bullshit.
Yeah.
Something like that. There's always a leaker. And frankly, Zelensky or somebody within the Ukrainian media would have gotten it out. It's not trending on TikTok anywhere. Details simply do not exist. Now, does that mean that it doesn't or hasn't happened? Not necessarily. But this idea that the war is going to end and that Russia's going to be put in their place. Let's zoom out and look at the bigger picture beyond the any potential minerals deal.
Yeah.
What was promised is not happening.
Well, and what confused me, and I didn't do any research on this because I figured if at least the mainstream news isn't picking it up, surely this little article on Facebook I saw wasn't accurate. And then what I did see, I think it was Yahoo. Yeah, I still go to Yahoo for their little carousel to see what the mainstream media is reporting.
The ticker.
And I saw something about a Ukrainian drone strike in Russia, like right before a big parade or something. Like, well, that seems weird to go and pull out that attack if you just signed this mineral deal. And I think like we're in this weird twilight zone where it's like, well, what the hell is even true? What's going on? Does it even matter anymore?
Well, I think that's okay. I use this example, and I go back to what you brought up, which I thought was a brilliant point, was when you mentioned the Malaysian earthquakes, USAID going away, and the China stepping in, and just the simplicity of what happens when the United States removes itself from foreign engagement, whether it's from stopping famine or disease or whatever it is.
Right.
Another part of the fallout here is our international radio stations, the international media. These things that were government funded. That we had satellite offices, and so many of these things. The goodwill / content, right, that we were managing within those environments, that's gone. So we are losing boots on the ground that were not carrying guns, but they were carrying cameras and pencils and taking notes.
Right.
We don't know. And we've removed ourselves from literal war zones that change the global axis of power.
Yeah.
That doesn't make sense.
Yeah.
It just doesn't make sense.
Well, and not to meld topics, but with what's going on in Gaza right now,
Same thing.
it's the exact same thing. We've completely kind of stepped back and cleaned our hands of it. But it's almost, to some extent, it's impossible to keep up with what's going on over there because you don't know what's true, what's not. Israel's just as bad at mixing, some of the news and stuff as the United States are with our, media outlets and whatnot. And you're just like, what's true? And then I keep falling back again, kind of going full circle here, back to this gonzo journalism. Well, what am I going to believe? I'm going to believe a Facebook video that was uploaded live from someone that appears to be living in Gaza. That's all. That's the most true thing that I can look at,
Yeah.
with no commentary, with no political pundits sitting behind a desk putting their spin on it. But hey, this is my take. This is my neighborhood. And this is a video of what I woke up to this morning was this hospital exploding,
So the Democrats were accused of, for years and years and years, owning mainstream media and manipulating the news, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera, right? Okay, fine. I'll acquiesce. The media leaned left. Why? I've got a theory. The simple theory is the vast majority of media are college-educated individuals that tend to live more liberal lifestyles, who tend to engage with cultures and communities that aren't their own, because by default, the definition of the job is to travel the world and cover news. So you learn things, right? So there's that. With what's happening now, though, I think that's part of the plan. I think the Republicans know that if you take away semblance of facts or images of truth, i.e., what's going on in Gaza, if in fact another hospital was bombed and whatever, if there's no pictures of dead Palestinian kids, then did it really happen?
Yeah.
And they can get away with that.
Right.
Now, has the Democrats done that over the years in their own way? I mean, look, Obama was deporter in chief, and how did he round people up? Who knows?
Right.
But Obama's not president now. I'm gonna skip forward here. I want to just get a generic take from you. This whole Doge Commission and, one of those 80-20 subject matters, or I should say catchphrases of waste, fraud, and abuse, right? There is not a single sane human being in the United States that can read and understands the English language. When they think of the federal government and they think of those three words, waste, fraud, and abuse, not one person would say, no, please don't root that out, right? So that's part one. Part two is waste. We all agree there's waste. We're spending too much, whether it's $10 per Band-Aid at the VA or whatever it is. I mean, there's a million examples of waste.
Yep.
I want to jump over to abuse. Abuse, by definition, is just these politicians who are earmarking these funds at these elevated rates to their districts, to their constituents, to their donors. That's abuse, right? Fraud is the one that's really pissing me off, though.
Yeah.
And here's why. Fraud is a crime. You know, if this government, with all three branches, including SCOTUS, for all intent and purposes, if waste, fraud, and abuse is the mandate that they've been told to go and fix, and they've found all these millions of people that are 182 years old receiving Social Security checks, et cetera, et cetera. Okay, hypothetically, let's say that there was 1 million checks that went out to individuals that were 150 years old or older. Clearly, that person didn't cash them, but somebody did.
Right.
Right? Who's getting arrested? Who is going to jail? Who is being prosecuted? Because if this is the law and order presidency, and fraud is one of the three main tenets of their approach, who's going down?
Yeah.
How do you when you hear that, what do you think? Because you're not seeing anybody being marched down to the courthouse for any of this.
This might be going off on a little bit of a rabbit hole. Short answer, nobody. And it makes me think of, did you watch The Day of the Jackal?
Which
on
one?
Peacock.
I've watched them. Oh, the
TV show, the series.
Yeah, it was great.
The software that guy's trying to put out, and the reason,
yeah.
Spoiler alert, the guy gets killed because of this software. What a brilliant concept to track waste, fraud, and abuse is you can track every penny, whether it's at a company or a government or whatever. I think long story short, we're never going to know where that money went, who was kind of the mastermind or masterminds behind it.
Yeah, but I think you and I both know, like, there's so much technical capability that you can take anybody's bank account anywhere in the world, including the Bahamas or offshore.
Yeah.
And you can backtrack it.
Oh, absolutely.
You can find it. You know who did it. And you can figure out who took it out there, because you can bribe any government in the world.
Yeah, I think one option is to start digging into it and be hyper transparent about what you're finding, hoping that people will come forward. And then as people start dying mysteriously, you follow those paths.
Yeah, like
the Epstein
clients.
But I think you're onto something here. And there's a couple of things going on, because on one hand, you've got the Democrats' reaction to all of this, which is, it's come off as like we're not against it, And then Chuck Schumer tries to walk back and basically like, well, we're against the way he's doing it. We know there's waste and stuff in there, but then you can point to, well, what have you done to crack down on it and all this stuff over the, however many years you guys controlled the House and the Senate and whatnot. But then the other point of it, and I think it's an interesting point to break out the three different areas from waste, fraud, and abuse, is why not tackle on the illegal stuff first? Why not focus on that? Prosecute them, and there's going to be some gray areas,
Sure.
Obviously abuse can lead to fraud. Sometimes it starts as waste and then turns into fraud or whatever, abuse. But I think the only way that you're going to get change is if heads start to roll. Otherwise, they're going to find more loopholes. They're going to find more ways to do this. But it all goes back to this drain the swamp narrative, that was the crying call.
Which is all bullshit, because it's not about the point at this stage. It's clear. They do not want to drain the swamp. They want to make it muddier.
Yeah.
And they want to make sure that their side is the only side with a dock.
So I've you know how much I like business metaphors, and I read a LinkedIn post from an agency owner who's sharing some tidbits about how he runs his agencies, and I thought this is applicable for this. He keeps just enough cash in his checking account, basically business checking account, so that they're $10,000 short to cover all their expenses for that month, knowing that his accounts receivable is going to make up that gap and they're going to have just amount to hit it. He said what this does is it's a forcing function, so that if something hits our books that we didn't expect, it causes us to at least ask the question, why?
Okay, I got it. So their ledger is imbalanced.
Exactly.
Because they
on
know
purpose.
it should be 10-0, 10-0.
All the time. And they've got reserve funds that they can move it, in a
Sure.
pinch or whatever, but it forces them to at least keep their finger on the pulse. You could do the same thing with personal finance. In fact, in the last couple of months I've moved excess money out of checking, make sure it's in savings, so I know I'm kind of running on a deficit on purpose.
You're working on a budget.
Working on a budget. It's one forcing function there. I think that's what the federal government is lacking. Instead of saying, hey, we're going to draw a hard line in the sand, they're saying, no, we're just going to open up more lines of credit.
No, I'm 100%. I mean, one of my biggest calling cards is, if I were to ever run, and I will never run, balanced budget amendment,
Yeah.
and I want everything means tested.
Yeah.
Frankly, I want every House of Representative, senator, I want them making $2 million a year, if not more.
Yeah.
But the way they get there is all these financial litmus tests are met. Balanced budget, you're reducing the deficit. You're under 4% unemployment, true unemployment.
Right.
GDP is above 3.5. Like all these things, right? That's the kind of power that this president has right now, in so much that he could execute legitimate, real ideas and policies legally,
Yeah.
constitutionally, but he is avoiding our system at every fucking turn.
Yeah.
It's an executive order onslaught, which all that means is when the pendulum swings the other way, and it always, always swings the other way,
Yep.
all this shit is going to get upturned, and Democrats are going to do the same thing that the Republicans are hating, and they're going to executive order their way out of it the other way.
It's just noise, and it's not producing any type of real change. Let me ask you this real quick. Would you ever run on a local level? What's the highest level of politics you would get involved in, realistically? Or not at all? Would you?
I would probably lose my neighborhood association race.
Yeah.
level.
But do you ever, honest question, do you ever get tired of talking about it all the time, but not
I think I prefer,
finding ways to actually?
I prefer building a team out of it. I would love to work with more potential candidates at every level, and focus on real ideas, real messaging. Like, in a way, find people that they will caucus one way or another, but I want them to be independently, centered independently.
Sure.
And I don't mean just from a policy perspective, sitting in the middle. I mean grounded individuals.
Right.
That intrigues me. So I'm working on some of that. I got a couple things, little pokers in the fire.
Yeah, because I think a lot of people, both of us included, love to talk about this stuff. But I think what we're lacking in our communities or in our country are people that just want to rise up and do something about it. Want to fix it, for lack of a better phrase.
Well, why don't we do this? Because you live in Mo 2 as well. Why don't we flip a coin, and whoever is heads or tails unseats Ann Wagner?
There we go. I just joined my neighborhood's HOA board, so I took my first step.
That's
already,
good practice. Well, then you're in the lead.
We'll see.
I nominate you. I got another one here. This is kind of just more of a statement than anything. Reading financial news the other day, watching it actually.
Yeah.
Tesla, our friend Elon, and his industry, his baby, right? SpaceX gets a lot of the headlines right now, but let's be clear, Tesla is his baby. It's in trouble. It's had a rebound in the stock market. It went all the way down to low 200s. It's up around 270, 280. I don't have it right in front of me. Anyway, it doesn't matter. But there's smoke within their world, specifically Europe. Tesla European sales for the month of April were down a combined 50%. Now, some people are immediately going to be like, whoa, sales are down in general. It's a little bit of an economic slowdown. Wrong. New car sales in Europe were up 3% overall over that time period. BYD, China's Tesla counterpart, its sales were up, guess how much?
50%.
50% in Europe. There were a lot of things baked into that news for me that applies to just kind of Doge and Elon and whole thing. Number one, Elon's brand is extremely tarnished globally.
Yeah.
Europeans are much more in tune with kind of cultural reactionaryism.
Sure.
And they're way more on the forefront of EV technology and EV demand. So the fact that they said, fuck you, Elon, we're out, we're not buying your cars. And in fact, this whole tariff thing, that's fine. Because your Malaysian point earlier, guess who stepped in and cut better deals with all of the EU?
I think that's it's just it's the reality is that we do not live in a vacuum, and we're not the 1,000-pound gorilla that we used to be. Like, there are plenty of other countries and world powers that are fully capable and more so willing to step into any voids we leave by pulling out of different international stuff. And I think what's interesting about this point, though, is whereas Malaysia is not going to directly impact the United States to some extent.
Correct.
This hurts Wall Street. This hurts you and me. This hurts anyone with Tesla stock in their 401k, whether they know what's even in there or not.
If you have anything NASDAQ based, QQQ, and anything with that is a technology fund, you're taking a hit on this.
I'd be curious, and I haven't spent a lot of time researching this topic, but I think there's no arguing that Tesla was the pioneering force in this. And so I say that because I know I've never owned a Tesla, but I know some people have kind of been like, it's okay. Kind of cheap for certain stuff, and the technology's good, but they skimp on this, and this. What are sales doing for like Rivian, and what are they doing for some of these other companies in the U.S.?
So I can say firsthand. So my wife just picked up a new Mini Countryman, the first year, the EV.
Yeah.
Number one, and this is a complete advertisement for Mini. I love cars.
Yep. I was hoping your Mustang was here. It's not a gorgeous day for it.
I thought about it, but so I've driven the thing, and I've had sports cars in the past, and I've driven a lot of really, really fast cars. This car, awesome.
Yeah.
It just tight. It immediately I felt like the Italian Job. I don't have Mark Wahlberg abs, but I was driving like him. And as I'm driving the car, she brought it home about a week ago, I start thinking about Tesla and the role and the growth of EVs and how these other makers are really, really leaning in. You have all these other automakers that have historically built good cars within their niches, right?
Yeah.
Mini was known for that small, tight steering. And now it's EV, and that thing's fast as shit.
Yeah.
And when you look at the car, my thought is, I like the design. It's a cool little design. I like these little British taillights, etc. I had no animosity towards the car in any way. And now Tesla has the permanent scar on its face of Elon and what he's doing with Doge. Like, it is the most insane, poorly thought out brand execution that I've ever seen in corporate American history.
Yeah, and I think what's interesting about the whole Elon situation is you could make an argument, and I think rightfully so, that Tesla never would have gotten to where it is without Elon being as kind of out in the front and vocal about what it is. Me personally, I think it's always a terrible idea to attach a personal brand, especially to a publicly traded company.
Unless it's Warren Buffett.
Yeah, unless it's Warren Buffett. And again, you're staying kind of in your lane or whatever.
Right.
But part of this whole thing, like I agree that there's no doubting that they're suffering. I mean, the numbers don't lie. I just wonder, like, how much of it is you're always going to have your Apple iPhone loyalist with the understanding that Galaxy has better features. Is that are we starting to see that in a saturated EV car market, and is that not the underlying cause, but it's absolutely contributing to it, I think.
So let me give you an example. I mean, just real quick, in comparing Tesla to BYD, because those are the two gorillas, theoretical gorillas within the EV marketplace. And for those of you that are listening, here's a quick fun stock tip info here. Tesla is trading, as of the time of this recording, at $275 a share. Now, here's the kicker number. The price to earnings ratio is 158.4. And simply put, it's the price of the stock is divided by its earnings, and typically in the S&P 500 companies somewhere in between 28 and 30. Some tech companies are usually in the low to mid 30s, affordable. So by definition, this is an unaffordable stock, but it's still going up. Now, that's at 158 price to earnings. If you look at BYD, the Chinese counterpart, it's trading now. Mind you, I bought this at 20. It's at 100 today, but its price to earnings ratio is at 23.8.
Yeah.
Okay, so if you do a multiplier, right, and it went up to Tesla valuation, then you're talking about roughly a 6 to 7x off of current stock price to get to Tesla's price to earnings ratio.
Yeah.
So if you're a discount shopper, for you shoppers out here, do you go to Neiman Marcus for the same pair of jeans or that you can buy at TJ Maxx, right? Because we already know Neiman Marcus is going to charge you about $280 for those jeans. TJ is going to get it to you for $40.
Yeah.
That's exactly what's going on here. That's Tesla's big issue right now. Because what's going to happen over the long run is Wall Street and investors are going to simply look at the company, look at its sales, look at its price to earnings ratio, and they're going to be like, it's not a good deal.
Right.
And then on top of that, we have this issue of Elon's brand, which has now limited us to a maximum of maybe 12% of the population, because you're only going to deal with the 35% that are maybe Trumpers. And of them, there's a whole bunch that live too far out that are never going to have an EV. And then you have even a smaller percentage that can afford it.
Yeah. Well, and there's no, what's the remedy? If you're on the board of directors for Tesla, you can't fire Elon because that's not going to just fix it overnight. I mean, it's not. How do you bounce back from this? I don't know that you do.
I think it is a fatal flaw, which is why I sold all my shares. So, you got something?
I do. I always like to kind of bring our conversation back local a little bit.
Yeah, do it. What you got?
So 2 weekends ago, we took my oldest daughter, Mia, to see Taylorville. Have you heard of Taylorville?
Illinois?
No. So it is a Taylor Swift cover band.
Oh, my God.
From a bunch of St. Louis local artists, and they played at the Factory.
Who's the singer?
What's her name? She's got an Irish first name. Siobhan, I think, or something like that. Anywho, they played at the Factory. We bought them on pre-sale tickets, and we took my daughter, both of my daughters and some friends of theirs, and my wife and I went. Spent probably, I don't know, $70 a ticket still. And they sold out 2 shows back-to-back at the Factory. And I think they played the day before also, Saturday, Sunday, so 4 shows. The day of, I was just checking ticket prices for it. Tickets were going from $300 to $1,000
for a cover band.
For a cover band of Taylor Swift.
God.
So there's a couple things I want to go with this. One, it was my first show at the Factory.
Great room.
Absolutely loved it. My 2 favorite things about seeing a show down there. Parking was so easy.
yeah, right.
And I had zero fear that I was going to get mugged or my car was going to get broken into.
Yeah, but that takes away from the adrenaline rush of going to the pageant.
Yeah, But so there was that. Really cool venue for those who haven't gotten to go. It's like the pageant kind of on steroids and updated and modernized a little bit, I'd say.
No, there's no room with better sound than that room, by the way.
Than the Factory?
Yeah.
So I think this was a hard concert for me to gauge that on, obviously, because I wasn't there for
the music.
Well, yeah, I was just there to basically witness my daughter's first concert. I'll leave it at that. I am a Swiftie, though. You can put that checkbox in my market. But anywho, what I saw when I was down there was this new rehearsal space.
Oh, yeah.
It's Gateway Sound. Gateway Sound or whatever. And I've had multiple people bring this up to me now. And it made me think of an earlier conversation that we had around, we're right smack dab in the middle of the country. Mm-hmm. What would be a great industry for St. Louis to get into? I'm not convinced that music is necessarily it. I think some of these other countries have a stronghold on it. But it was really interesting to see the CEO of Gateway and multiple other people say, a huge factor of this was the fact that St. Louis is smack dab right in the middle of the map. It's easy for tours, for folks to get here. What I think is kind of ironic about this is for a lot of artists that I like, St. Louis is still a flyover city.
Oh, yeah.
So they're going to come here to rehearse, but they're not even going to, come down the street or even go next door and practice at the Factory or whatnot.
Right.
But it got me back to this thing, and Cars comes into it too. For so long, the Midwest was the Rust Belt. It was, building and manufacturing these cars, and it was all this manufacturing jobs. And I know manufacturing jobs has been in the talk track for a while. What I also saw recently was Apple, I think back in February, committed $500 billion to U.S. investments over the next 4 years with kind of they called it high-tech manufacturing jobs and whatnot.
So I saw that too. I dug into that a little bit. There's a huge asterisk on that. They're moving $500 billion worth of production out of, quote, China, but the lion's share of it is
it's going to India, right?
India.
Yeah.
So, it's, we're splitting hairs here, but Again, we're still talking about labor that in those markets is making sub $2 a day.
Yeah.
We do not want to make iPhones here. Period. End of story.
Well, okay, so I've got 2 points with my rambling bit right there. One, I was doing back of the napkin math on the Taylor Swift cover band thing, and I could be wildly off here, but I'm pretty good with numbers. I think if these guys played 4 shows that weekend and ticket prices, revenue, not profit, I think they brought in close to $1 million.
Yeah,
for covering Taylor Swift songs.
Yeah,
that's fucking crazy. That and it's a brilliant model too, and huge production, backup dancers, probably 15 wardrobe changes.
I wonder how much they have to pay Taylor's label.
So that was a question that I had, but what a great testament to the influence that you have as an artist.
Yeah, true.
And they're not just going to St. Louis, they're touring around or whatever. So that was my quick nod to Taylor Swift. But my second thing is like I want to continue to noodle on this. What do we do with our location? Because as I was driving down here, I was like, man, that was a great experience out in Chesterfield. Coming at it from a company perspective, sometimes it's easier just to scrap and rebuild from the ground up.
Yep.
Is Chesterfield going to become the new St. Louis?
Well, I don't think that will ever happen to the extent that we would maybe envision.
Right.
You can't replicate neighborhoods. You can't replicate history. You can't replicate row houses, et cetera, et cetera, et cetera.
Yep.
And I think the other thing is the larger factor is really food and beverage. As long as your eating establishments are in a strip mall, your community is not really a community that I care to dive into.
Completely agree with you.
That being said, you give me some parking lot friendly, easy access, high end entertainment that I can consume and then leave. I'm down with that.
Yeah.
And I've been to, I saw Charlie Crockett there. I saw Midland there. Really great shows. Yeah. Factory's killing it. I got a funny one for you here. This one's coming from, I'm going to play an audio clip. This is from Twitter Bulwark cut the snippet. You'll recognize the voice, but here we go.
I love Canada. I have a lot of respect for the Canadians. Wayne Gretzky, I mean, how good, the great one.
The great one.
You happen to have a very, very good hockey player right here on the Capitals, who I have a lot of. He is a big, tough cookie too. He just broke the record, and he's a great guy. And
did you catch what he did there? He's talking about Canadians.
Yeah.
He's saying how much he likes Canadians. I have respect for Canadians. After all, hockey, Wayne Gretzky. And right here on the Capitals, a really great guy, breaking all of the records.
Russian.
He's Russian. How do you not, how do his handlers, which really just says to me he has 0 handlers.
Yeah.
How do you not know some of the basic stuff? Like, you have a guy like Ovechkin, is who he was talking about.
Yeah.
Is in your backyard. Like, you're this golfer. You're golfing with Tiger. You've got to, Tommy Tuberville bringing all his college football buddies to the White House on Saturdays. You're one of the crew. You go to all the MMA fights, right? You know who Conor McGregor is. You know that he's Scottish. He's Irish, actually.
I caught you there.
How do you like?
So before I comment, I would have to go back and watch the full clip. I've seen that clip before.
Yeah,
I'd have to go back and watch the full clip because
that was
maybe it was a pivot. Maybe he was going from, and I shouldn't be.
No,
I
watched the full. I watched the full clip. He fucked it up.
I mean, you take one look at Ovi and you know the guy's not Canadian.
Yeah, no. You were you from the south side of Toronto? You look a little rough. Hey, I want to wind us up here. I want to have a little bit of fun. I'm gonna roll through A or B. I'm gonna do rapid fire Q&A for you. Before we go here, I'm gonna little Manis Brothers in the background as we do this because we're on our way out of here. Choose. I'm gonna give you an option. When you're watching social media and you see these little reels and clips, do you prefer A or B? A, whenever parents come home from tours overseas to surprise their children, or pressure washing concrete time-lapsed?
Gosh, I get hooked into both of them, which I don't know what that says about me.
Gotta pick one.
I'm a DIY guy. Give me the concrete videos.
Concrete. All right, number 2 is anything because all these Asian cooking videos where they use chopsticks in the egg dishes, where they do these fluffy omelets and stuff. Anything chopstick egg dish versus random white trash knockouts on the street.
Oh, got to go with the knockouts.
And finally, the coup d'etat question of the day. Do you prefer watching Karens go crazy or cats fuck with their owners?
Oh, man. They're kind of the same. I got to go A on that one. Karen's for sure. I don't know what any of those answers tell you about me, but
I don't know. I'm sure there's some
hopefully too, anything
the
there.
Matrix somewhere. We'll figure it out.
that's all. I like that segment. We got to keep that.
I'll
have some
The next time you do it for
I'll
me,
do some for you,
You
yeah.
give me ABs. Hey, tell me you're joking. We're out here, JB here with Tom Mudd on this lovely Tuesday. I'm ditching the Monday suck thing. I'm just gonna. Every day kind of sucks these days, unless you're not on socials and you're hanging with family and friends and having bourbon and listening to the Manis Brothers. Live from, not live from anywhere. They're from South St. Louis. Look them up. Go follow them on Spotify. Appreciate it, Tom.
Always a pleasure. Thanks for having me.
Pleasure, dude. Catch you next time. We're out of here. Thanks for listening.